This is Review Unit 2 in our second section, so R2.2 Exponents and Powers. And our essential question for this lesson is, how are exponents used in algebraic expressions? So let's start. When we're looking at exponents, sometimes we call them powers. So here in this example we have 2 to the third power. So we would say that 2 to the third power is my exponential expression. And of course, we know that 2 to the third power, hopefully, means 3 factors of 2. So 2 times itself 3 times. So 3 factors of 2. And another way to say that is 2 times itself 3 times. So let's talk a little bit more about the vocabulary here. The 3 that's in the top position here, that little arrow in blue, let's erase here, there we go. Let's do that little arrow in blue, the 3 is the exponent, and that tells you how many times to multiply the factor by itself. And the 2 is called the base. We say that the base is raised to the exponent. The whole expression is the power. We sometimes say 2 to the third power, but really this whole expression here is the power. 3 is the exponent, 2 is the base, 2 to the third is the power expression. Alright, so now we've done a little bit of the language. Let's do a little bit of examples. So, let's read and write these powers. So if I have 4 raised to the second is something we might say. That means 4 times itself 2 times. There are a couple of different ways that we could say this out loud. We could say 4 squared. That's one way we could say it. And sometimes we say 4 to the second power. Sometimes we also just say 4 to the second, and we leave off that word power, but it means the same thing. If I have this power expression, that means 5 times itself 3 times. So 5 times 5 times 5. And if I wanted to say that out loud, we would say 5 to the third. I already third power. Great. And then the last one, here we have a variable in our expression, but it means take this, whatever this base is, and multiply it by itself this many times. So this would be x times itself 6 times. So x times x times x times x times x times x. Alright, and the way that we would say that out loud would be x to the 6th power. Alright, so now we know what they mean, we know how to say it out loud. Let's evaluate some exponential expressions. So let's evaluate each of these variable expressions for values where a is equal to 2 and b is equal to 3. So in the first expression we have a squared plus b squared. And hopefully we remember from order of operations that we have to evaluate these exponents before we can do the addition. So this example would become 2 squared plus 3 squared. So remember, this means 2 times itself, 2 times, in other words 2 times 2, which is 4. And 3 squared means 3 times itself twice, or 3 times 3, which is 9. Then we can add 4 plus 9 is 13. Perfect. Let's do part B. Here we have parentheses around the sum a and b. So if we plug in or evaluate this expression, we would have 2 plus 3 inside the parentheses and my exponent outside. So that means first I have to add 2 and 3 and get 5. So if I write 5 in parentheses and square it on the outside, That's the same as writing just 5 squared. So that means 5 times itself, 5 times 5, which is, of course, 25. All right, let's do a couple more. Third one, 2a squared. That's how I would read it out loud. But pay attention to where the multiplication is. Here, it's 2 times a squared. So 2 times a squared like that. This means that we have to evaluate a squared first. So if I plug in that value of a, it would be 2 times, a is 2, and then we would square it. So order of operations says deal with those exponents first. So first I'm going to find 2 squared. That's 4. Then I'm going to multiply that by 2. And of course 2 times 4 is 8. All right, we got just one more to go here. Now notice how this one has parentheses around the product of 2a. Different than in part C where it was 2 times a squared. This one is the whole product, 2a. That whole thing is getting raised to the second power. So if I plug in my value of a, this really means 2 times 2 raised to the second power. 2 times 2 is 4. And 4 raised to the second power, of course, is the same as just 4 squared. 4 times 4, which is 16. Perfect. All right, now, for our third example, I want you to watch out for negatives, because negatives can do some funky things with our exponential expressions. In this first example here, we have negative 3 squared. Now, because that negative is not inside parentheses like we see in the second example, we're actually really finding negative 3 squared. That's what this expression really means. It means evaluate the 3 squared first and then make it negative. So really this would be negative 3 times 3, which is 9. And my final answer would be negative 9. This is different than in the second expression. In the second expression, I have negative 3 in parentheses. And if I want to square that, that really means take negative 3 and multiply it by itself. We have negative 3 2 times here. And of course, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. A negative times a negative is a positive. So, if we think about this in a similar kind of way, let me give you a couple more here. Let's say I had, let's say, negative 5 squared. Now I know this would be negative 5 times negative 5, or positive 25. In a similar way, if I had negative 5 squared with no parentheses, I'm going to do the 5 squared first, which is 25, and then apply the negative, or then turn it negative, so that would be negative 25. So think about what's a good question that goes along with these examples. I do want you to, of course, include the examples in your left-hand column questions as well. So, you know, something simple like evaluate, negative 3 squared, negative 3 squared like this. Ooh, this is a good thing to talk about. Here, the way I would say this out loud is negative 3 quantity squared. That means I want you to square the entire quantity of whatever I just said. So if I say negative 3 quantity squared, it's like I'm telling you that negative 3 is the quantity, so put parentheses around it and then square it. The way I'd say this out loud is just negative 3, and then I'd probably pause and then say squared. So negative 3 squared. So that's a nice thing to watch out for in the language and how we talk about what we mean, because it's hard to tell the difference between these two and which ones you would be indicating if you just said negative 3 squared. So think about that. All right, so that is all of the examples. We'll do the sentence frames in class. So again, your summary, you guys know, 3 to 4 sentences long. Make sure that it answers your essential question and it answers what you have for your left-hand column questions as well. Make sure that you include that and go back and put in some of the left-hand column questions because I didn't do it for you this time. Okay?